All right, welcome back to the Modern Mindfulness Podcast. Hey, everyone, it's me, Rebecca, and today I have Andrew Holecek. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hey, all right, so before we get into the real talk, I'm going to share a little bit about you with the audience. And Andrew Holecek teaches seminars on spirituality, meditation, and dream yoga. He studied with the greatest living meditation masters in India and Nepal and has completed the traditional 3-year Buddhist meditation retreat. His books include Preparing to Die, Practical Advice and Spiritual Wisdom from the Tibetan Buddhist Tradition, and Dream Yoga, Illuminating Your Life Through Lucid Dreaming and the Tibetan Yogas of Sleep. His new book, Reverse Meditation, offers a radical new way to relate to physical pain and emotional hardship. For more information, you'll find it all below in the show notes. But without further ado, Andrew, officially welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I look forward to connecting with you.
Yes, and as I was sharing before I hit record, this way that you bring about meditation feels very aligned with what I've been studying for a while. And I think it's so important to go into this reverse meditation. So I feel called to just start there. What is reverse meditation?
Yeah, right.
People have heard of meditation. Now, I don't know if some brains are going, what, reverse?
Yeah. Well, I don't make the term up. It actually comes from one of the more advanced students, I should say, tracks or schools of Tibetan Buddhism in a tradition called the Mahamudra. And the notion is somewhat radical. I learned it in my 3-year retreat, first time I came across the practice, first time I heard of the term, and I was immediately impacted by it. I said, wow, this is awesome. And so it's called reverse for a number of reasons. One, what these practices do is they reverse our understanding of what meditation is, that often people, somewhat appropriately, but merely provisionally, think that meditation is about getting Zen, chilling out, this kind of quiescent aspect of it, which is completely viable. It's 100% appropriate way of relating to it. And when the world is on fire, which is the way it is, chilling out is a really good thing. But the reverse practices really, they challenge that. They invite us to transcend, but include things like mindfulness. And therefore, not only does it allow the present moment to arise in experience, but we invite, and this is the reverse approach, unwanted experiences. So these practices are fundamentally designed to alter our relationship to unwanted experiences by going directly into them. And in so doing, again, they radically expand our understanding of practice, our understanding of the power of meditation, what it can accomplish. And therefore, as I playfully say, by putting your meditation into reverse, you'll find yourself going forward, because it basically allows you to bring what previously obstructed your practice, your path, your meditation, now can actually accelerate it. In other words, there's nothing off limits here. You're talking about emotional hardship. You can work with that in a new way. Physical pain, and I can share some quite painful physical experiences I've had, like kidney stones, like one of the most painful things you can go through. That's really where the power of these practices came into my life. And I finally started to realize, wow, more people need to know about these things. So hence the aspiration for writing this book.
Oh, yes. And so how long has it been brewing? I know I've listened to some other things and poked around in your past, and it felt like it was a current that was there for a while.
Yeah.
And so was there a turning point, a point where you're like, the book needs to be written?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been brewing for some 25 years, which is when I was first introduced to them in my long retreat. Strengthened by, like I mentioned, with my experience of these really intense physical sets of discomforts, pain, the kidney stones and whatnot. But it really started to come to life to me over the last 5 years or so, when I started to realize, and this was not in the traditional exposition that I learned, I just started to extrapolate this to emotional duress and hardship. And so what really made me inspired me to write on this was the ability for these practices to radically transform my relationship to really unsettling states of mind. And like what's happening in the world today, there's so much unsettled divisiveness and contentiousness and all kinds of anger and fear and everything. And so these practices have really helped me negotiate and relate to these otherwise very unpleasant, untoward emotional states of mind. And because of that, I said, whoa, I think other people, I'm no different from other people. Maybe they can benefit from these somewhat radical practices in the same way that I have. And it also seemed to me, even though I'm a massive fan of mindfulness, its colossal contribution, I'm also quite mindful of the limitations. And so while I endorse it unconditionally, I'm also a little bit of a critic these days, because mindfulness sedates, it doesn't liberate. And if you're looking for liberation, mindfulness is a necessary platform, but it's necessary but not sufficient. You need more than that. And that's where some of these other practices come into play. And so the reverse meditations are a set of practices that, like I mentioned earlier, they include the mindfulness practices, but they also transcend it. And that really is a way to augment our understanding of meditation altogether, developing what I playfully call industrial strength meditation. I mean, like, where does your feel-good strategy go when you don't feel good? Where does your meditation go when the crap hits the fan? These practices allow a larger kind of crucible of transformation that allows you to bring virtually anything, especially unwanted experiences, onto your path.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, and mindfulness. Yeah, I feel like I have to mention podcast, Modern Mindfulness, right? And
yeah.
I hold the word as awareness. And then to clarify, there are the mindfulness practices that can be dated, and something that I also believe can be, I forget the word you use, but a little, limiting. So having awareness while you're moving through something like your meditation is my definition of like using mindfulness as a tool in that way. And so I think talking people through meditation, I believe a lot of listeners have meditated, and I think that's such a cool part of life right now on planet Earth. Like, people have meditated. You can get all these apps and you get on YouTube and all this stuff, but they're meditating. Like you said, there's this level of, oh, I'm just using this to chill out. So could you walk us through, I'm guessing you've had those moments too, like, I'm just going to meditate to relax or chill out or forget about the day, and then something comes in. What's the process with reverse meditation? How do you handle a pain point?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, first of all, you treasure the opportunity that you have with your mindfulness and the proficiency developed there, and realize that it has a tremendous amount to offer. But it also can lend itself to things like spiritual bypassing, all kinds of subtle little traps where you get these potentially escapist feel-good strategies. And that's where, if you're interested in deeper diving, going into a kind of more spiritual end of things, then these other practices come into bear. And so with mindfulness as a platform, the reverse meditations are a tad bit advanced for a couple of reasons. And so therefore, there's one kind of additional practice that's a very powerful intermediary between mindfulness and the reverse meditations. And this is the genius meditation that I have 2 chapters on in the reverse meditation book, on what's called open awareness. This is a term, it's also called non-referential shamatha without sign. It has a lot of different terms. But what this practice does, that again, in this kind of narrative of transcending but including, it embraces mindfulness, goes a little bit beyond it, and allows one to develop the capacity to say yes, kind of this radical acceptance to whatever arises. But it does so within the pacified environment of meditation per se. So we transition from mindfulness to a little bit of familiarity with the practice of open awareness, which I think is also a vastly underappreciated, underexposed, underrated practice in the West. This is a major contribution that I think needs to be emphasized. And so with a little bit of familiarity with open awareness, then there are the 4 stages of the reverse practices. And these are basically 4 different ways to increasingly dive into unwanted experiences that one can stop at any point. And the 4 stages themselves, I can walk you through them. The first stage is the most accessible, which is the observation phase, where basically what you're invited to do when you're feeling some discomfort, some pain, emotional or physical, is to get a better bead on it. Because, our default habitual reactivity to unwanted experiences is to just get out, FedEx, run the other way. So again, reverse. No, don't run away, go in. In fact, one of the really iconoclastic Tibetan teachers, Trungpa Rinpoche, famously said, there is no way out. The magic is to discover that there's a way in. And so these practices show you the way in. So the first step is observe the observational phase. You develop this kind of witnessing awareness. This is where both mindfulness and open awareness come into play, where you provisionally step out to get a better bead on what you're feeling. And then you turn around, you pull this kind of U-turn into the second phase, which is basically being with it. You allow yourself to come up alongside the pain, so to speak, whatever it is, to develop a greater sense of understanding and familiarity to it, literally spend time with it. And then that somewhat rapidly can progress into the third phase, which is the kind of analytic meditation phase, or the examination phase, where now you're alongside the pain and you start to inquire. And this is not just a cognitive cerebral inquiry. It's led by questions, but then it's a somatic, visceral, embodied inquiry, where you really start to ask questions like, okay, let's just take physical pain. What is this thing I have spent my entire life trying to avoid? Really? Like, what is it made of? In the traditional texts, they sometimes have these somewhat contrived questions like, does it have a color? Does it have a shape? These are basically like a skillful lawyer leading the witness. They basically lead the meditative mind into a more intimate relationship with what pain actually is. So in a very profound way, these practices are demolition meditations, as I call them. They deconstruct our provisional understanding of pain and suffering. And so that's what these practices do. They deconstruct suffering back into pain, because pain and suffering are not the same. Suffering is an inappropriate relationship to pain. You can totally deconstruct your suffering back into pain. And then with this practice, you can even deconstruct pain back into what it really is. And that's raw, intense sensory awareness. Hard stop. That's it. To which we append this cultural label pain and all the baggage that comes with it. And so the third phase is really, scientists love this part, academics, the people that like to inquire, analytic meditators, like, whoa, this is really cool. Let's really get a sense of what this pain is. But then it really comes to fruition and maturation in the fourth stage. And again, people can stop at any point. I guide them through it. I invite them to do these particular experiments. And then they go, hey, I'm good with the observation. I'm going to stop there. I'm good with step 2. I'm good with step 3. Awesome. Any one of those will help. But if you really want to go all the way to the non-dual spiritual end of things, then you go to the fourth step, which is you actually just unite with the pain. You're no longer just being with it. So the difference between step 2 and 4, step 2 is you be with it. Step 4 is you be it, you become it. And so this is the acronym here is observe it, be with it, examine it, unite, or yoke with it. So the acronym is OBEY. It's this invitation to obey a new order of relationship to unwanted experience. And with some proficiency, it's amazing, Rebecca, what I've noticed, these practices incorporate into life rather quickly. And I think some of it has to do with the intensity of the practice itself, and almost kind of commands rapid incorporation. And so I find myself, when I teach it, people quite rapidly start to perform, so to speak, quickly because of the intensity of the practice itself. And so the fourth stage is just so much to say here, but ever so briefly, this is where it gets beyond profound, because this is where you can enter quite literally into a non-dual relationship to this experience. And it's a little bit like T.S. Eliot once wrote so beautifully about music, when he said, music heard so deeply, you become the music while the music lasts. Mm-hmm. And so this is the same. Pain felt so deeply, you become the pain while the pain lasts. Well, this is everything is in quotation marks here, because when you become this phenomena called pain so completely, what absolutely magically happens is both the sense of you and the sense of the pain itself dissolve into each other. And so there's another really powerful little summary maxim here, and then I'll stop. And people start to, you can experience this in your practice. And I invite people to explore it. By becoming one with your pain, there's no one to hurt. There's just this deconstructed, raw, intense sensory awareness to which we append the label. And this from the outside, like, what is he talking about? This is like crazy. You want me to do what? You want me to just completely dissolve into this experience? I'm going, yeah, try it. And it's really, these things only come to life when you sit down and you give them the world. And you can do this by, provisionally biting your lip, thinking your thumb, fingernail into your thumb, just artificial contrived things. You can also do it with really intense noise. Like in my programs, we'll bring in some boom boxes and just kind of prep people and then hit them with a lot high volume, not painful, but just really intense cacophony. And then what happens is, lo and behold, hey, the next time a screeching siren goes screaming down the road, instead of your default aversive contraction away from it, something you'll say, hey, wait a second, I can open to this. I can meditate on this intense sound. I can meditate on this particular discomfort. And then I can say a little bit more later about other forms of application, about working with thought and the like. But it's a bit of a download. The 4 stages, I find anybody can stop at any point. But boy, you go to that 4th step, you start to work with that. This is a game changer. I mean, this will radically, irrevocably alter your relationship to unwanted experience. And it creates this quality of indestructibility. It's like, I feel at this point, I can handle anything. It's like my mind and my heart are big enough. My understanding of this thing called pain and emotional duress is, I think, so thorough now. It's like there's a quality of my heart mind now that really feels kind of unfazed, untouched, like space itself. And that's why the open awareness practice comes in, because space, I mean, it's an interesting phenomena, right? On one level, it's the softest thing in the world, right? Nothing's softer than space, but it's also the most indestructible. You can't burn it, you can't cut it, you can't torch it. And so the practice of open awareness in conjunction with reverse practices allow us to mix our mind with space and establish this new radical relationship. So long-winded answer to a great question, but there's a lot to say about these puppies, right?
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate the breakdown and the steps. And I think a lot of, especially the analytical brains out there, to have like a 4-step process is something that will help a lot of people. Where when I go into things, it's a little more loose and I feel my way through what probably are 4 phases or however many, but I think that's really, yes. And then even for people to look at their patterns of when they stop, maybe it's step 2. And I'm a believer in the way you do something is the way you do anything. It's like when you're on a journey of liberation and you're close and then you keep stopping, and not that it's intentional, but it could just be something where, okay, the emotion comes up in a meditation and they're with it. And then that's where they stop. And that's okay, right? Everyone's going to find their own way in their own time, but to have your process here to list out 2, 3, and then 4, I just feel like that will really help a lot of folks move through where they might constantly kind of bump up against, right? Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And even just the potentiality behind it. Even just like, whoa, I never thought about doing that before. And so basically you're just planting all these meditative seeds of inquiry and relationship. And then so when people do it, they go, wow, geez, I never thought I could do that with my heartbreak, with the pain, whatever it is, any unwanted experience. It's like, wait a second, I've never really thought about looking at these things in this particular way. And whatever we can do to alter our habitual kind of knee-jerk reactivity around unwanted experiences, right? Because that's where the exacerbation takes place. And so I use this kind of so-called equation where I talk about S equals P times R, which is basically suffering equals pain times resistance. And so the so-called pain is never the issue. The inappropriate relationship, the resistance to it is the issue. And so that's the reverse. Yeah, most people were trained almost even culturally to resist, to avoid. Well, we go against that. We reverse that habitual strategy. And this is where the magic comes in, right? Do a little bit of simple math. You drop the resistance, the suffering disappears. And then what are you left with? This thing called pain, P. Well, what exactly is that? Take a really close look. And that's the invitation, once again, is, hey, don't take my word for it. Don't take the lineages that have talked about these things for thousands of years. Check it out. See if it works for you. If it works, great. It'll change your life. If it doesn't, I love what the Dalai Lama says, if you find what I say useful, take it to heart. If you don't, throw it out the window. And so, throw it out the window if it doesn't work for you. But man, do we live in a world of pain these days? I mean, look at the upheaval. Look at everything that's happening. Is there, in fact, a way to bring these unwanted experiences onto the meditative and even spiritual path? Yeah, there is. And this set of practices are, I think, one of the real contributions from the wisdom traditions.
Yes. So much brewing. Like if I could answer, ask 5 questions at once, I would, or go into 5 different points, I would. And I want to loop back to the labels as you were describing all of that. And I've seen this for years and felt this for years and offer it to clients and things sometimes. Like, what if we were to just peel back the words, peel back the labels and get into the energy of, for, in this case, pain. What is pain? And I believe you mentioned raw, intense sensory awareness. And even when we strip those words away, like what is something like pain? It's energy, and in and through the body, the only way out is through. It's like getting to where the oneness, or however you might describe it, where it's all just energy. So pain being energy. And your book title, How to Use Your Pain and Most Difficult Emotions as the Doorway to Inner Freedom. So how do you describe freedom? Is it this kind of oneness, energetic, like through the pain, there is the freedom, or where does freedom fit in?
Yeah. So it's not freedom in the sense of escapism, right? And that's the usual rendering that we have of even notions like the spiritual or meditative path. And so in a very real way, these practices free you even from the notion of freedom. They help you determine that you don't have to have any particular experience to be free. That's the key. We tend to think, oh, if I just attain this meditative absorption state, the samadhi state, or if I just, if only this or this, then I'll be free. I'm not dissing that in a provisional, conventional way. Absolutely not. It has validity. But what's so radical about these practices, and again, this warrants an exclamation point, is they show you that you can find freedom in what you previously deemed as constrictions, contractions, and confinements. And so this is where transitions into the real wisdom of the non-dual traditions. And it does really, we can say this over and over, you do not have to have any special experience to be free. So the freedom here is a freedom of inappropriate relationship. It's the freedom of this contraction that I write a lot about, this really insidious array of contractions that take place from overt, really heavy duty, what I call super contractors, like anger and fear, rage, panic, those things that we can really access, all the way down to extremely subtle contractions that are taking place all the time, even at the level of distraction. And so these practices go to a kind of irreducible description of freedom, which in a real way, like just to reinstate, even allows us to be free of the notion of freedom itself, that we can find what we're looking for right here, right now. And I don't know about you, but this is super empowering. I mean, this to me is like, hey, wait a second. I already have everything I need. It's right here, right now. And another way to say this, the meditative and spiritual path, therefore, is actually more perceptual than actual. You're not really going anywhere. It's the idea of opening the aperture, opening one's mind and heart to realize that, hey, wait a second, I'm already free. I actually am already free. I just need to know how I keep imprisoning myself. And I do that through this referencing process, through contraction. And this goes pretty deep, like in the latter parts of the book. I take this to some pretty deep ends where even the very notion of ourself, the ego, what we think of as our self-sense, even that is a construct. And so this is the really cool thing that happens towards the end of the book, is not only do we deconstruct this thing called pain and suffering, by implication, we actually deconstruct this construct called the self, the thing that is the fundamental source of our entrapment, the fundamental source of anti-freedom is the very notion of selfhood, ego, that kind of thing. And so we start a little bit like a gentle on-ramp, mindfulness, open awareness, provisional stages of the reverse practices, and then we go really deep at the very end of the book for those who want to go that far. And if they don't, fine, you stop early or long. But it's basically to show, whoa, there is a lot here. And this can take you all the way to what the traditions talk about as the awakened state, right?
Yes. Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe some of your background is more from a tantric lineage of certain philosophies. And I'm feeling that I've studied more from the yoga traditions and realizing that even within that tantric versus something more classical, of life being a gift versus we've got to figure the puzzle out of life and then we're set free. And so as I've taught trainings and things through the years, that's like the simplest way I've explained maybe a tantric outlook on life, and then something that might be more classical, and then even feeling where people's own, the way they've been moving through the world, where does that fit in? Like you said, like you are free, you're already free, figuring out what's maybe getting in the way of that. So is there something within the tantric lineage too that's specific to the way you're creating this?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's their trinal footing, right? So,
Mhm.
so even though I act as a kind of a cultural translator and I have a doctorate in health sciences, so I've spent a career as a dental surgeon working in the pain business. I've been involved in studies with pain. So I'm not approaching this from an armchair philosophical point of view. I mean, I've written tens of thousands of prescriptions for narcotics. I know all about the pathophysiology of pain. So I have some traction with what I'm talking about here. But bringing this kind of these classic approaches, and I want to say a little bit about the tantric end of it, into this kind of cultural translation thing, which is what I'm doing, is in fact helping understand people understand what tantra really is. I mean, this is such a multivalent, loaded term that is vastly misunderstood. In this capacity, tantra is largely related to the Western alchemical traditions, where basically what one is trained to do, whether it's transforming lead into gold in kind of classical Western alchemy, or poison into medicine in a tantric approach. The great gift of Tantra is somewhat I was alluding to earlier. There are no weeds in the garden of Tantra. Everything is allowed. There's nothing is verboten. Everything, your mind and your heart, you're big enough to accommodate, say yes, radically accept everything. And that's tantric in spirit. It's where you're not centrifuging out the good from the bad. You're looking at the equanimous nature of whatever arises. And this means even things like pleasure and pain. And so many references like the following from Trungpa Rinpoche, when pleasure and pain, oh no, this is Milarepa, when pleasure or pain are not two different things, this is meditation as it can be. So the apex of meditation is to see no difference. When pleasure or pain are ornaments, which it is pleasant to wear, from Trungpa Rinpoche. So that's Tantra in this deepest sense. It means weave, thread, continuity etymologically. And so what it means is that if you look very deeply at whatever phenomena arises, you will find the divinity within it. You will find the gold within the lead. You will find the poison within the medicine. You will find the wisdom within the confusion. If, again, you simply know how to look properly, that once again reinstates the centrality of the path is perceptual, not actual. You're already in heaven. You're already in a pure land. You're already in whatever you might append as a sacred ground. The issue is really one of recognition. And so that's the radical nature of these practices at the fruitional level, is to recognize on the spot, hey, wait a second, wow, this previously really uncomfortable experience, when it's related to properly, this is actually sacred. In classic Tibetan Tantra, it's referred to as the deity principle. You actually realize the deity that arises, or is actually there, it's simply revealed in whatever experience takes place. And so that's real Tantra. It has tremendous cash value, street value. It's gritty, in your world relationship to what we previously deemed anti-spiritual, anti-meditative, now becomes, whoa, you mean, well, I can go into those dimensions of experience that I thought were completely counter to my meditative spiritual path, and realize this is where the real goods are. This is where real meditation takes place. This is where real spirituality takes place. And so if you understand that, and that's why there's a whole bunch of stuff in the book about preparing that view, because boy, does this go against the grain of our Western ways of relating to things. Then you have the practices that support it, and then all these little brief, maybe I can give one or two of these really brief mini meditations, mini contemplations that we can leave with your listeners, so you can start to kick the tires for yourself and say, hey, wait a second, this is interesting. I never thought we could do that. So is it just a suggestion, maybe before we close, I could leave you with one or two just little things you can play with, just to say, whoa, this is an interesting way to deal with an unwanted state.
Yes. You read my mind. I was definitely going to ask you. And the book is full of so many. I like the book for the digestible the colored blocks and the ways you can like just read a little paragraph and, and so I was definitely hoping that we would get there in the conversation, that you would share a simple practice. So yes, let's do that near the end.
Absolutely.
And, I've been studying body-based things for a very long time, and most recently somatic experiencing and understanding a little bit more of these trauma responses people hold. And now knowing with the meditation I've studied for years, what people are bumping up against is whether we call it trauma, whether we call it just old wounds, conditional, what have you, the pain of the world. And you mentioned what I felt like was like this body-based pain. And so what role in your eyes does the body play in meditation? I think for years, people were looking at meditation as it's just for the mind, but I fully believe that it's not just the mind. And of course, when you look at the nervous system, it's all mind body. But what role does the body play in what you've been studying?
Great question. It's everything. It's everything. And in fact, one of the key characteristics of Tantra is body is as important as mind. And so the body here is really core because it's the crucible for this level of transformation. And so what these practices do is they invite us to this, there's a lot of common parlance about waking up. I get it, makes sense. I actually think it's more compelling to talk about waking down into the wisdom of the body. I mean, the body has tremendous capacities of healing and innate wisdom. I mean, Saraha, one of the great tantric masters, talks unequivocally about, wisdom abides in the body. Your body knows what to do with this stuff. I mean, just one very brief neuroanatomical physiological correlate here is that if you're having an emotional upheaval, you have some like burst of anger or whatever. Well, if you leave it alone, within 90 seconds, the biochemical correlates of that emotional upheaval are purified. Your body knows what to do with this. So this is revelatory. If you're in a funk, you're having a bad mood, someone got your goat and you're still with it hours or days later, hey, you're the one that's doing CPR on this thing. You're the one that's keeping it alive long after it should be dead. The body knows what to do with this stuff. So the invitation and the journey, again, there is no way out. The magic is to discover there is a way in. Well, that way in is also into your body. So your body becomes the crucible of this transformation. And so when you understand this deeply at the level of the map, the doctrine, the teachings, the tantras and other that support it, you start to work your way in with these meditations, and I'm sure similar to the kind of work you're doing, you realize that if you just simply stay fully in the present moment, in the wisdom of your body, which in this, like you were alluding to earlier, the separation between body and mind here is completely arbitrary. I mean, on one level, you can talk about it as mind is just really subtle body, and body is just really gross mind. I mean, they're just two ends of the spectrum. Where does one end and the other begin? So by waking down, staying in your body, staying embodied fully, you realize you're going to actually start to boycott and interrupt that contraction that squeezes the unwanted experience out of your body, throws it into your head. That's where the suffering starts. That's where the crap show starts, because that's where the commentary and the narrative of the chattering ego comes into play. And so that's part of the practice. You notice the tendency to squirt out of the body into the commentary. You recognize that, you stop it, you cut it, you come back down, you come back down. And again, that's the reverse strategy, right? Usually when we're hurting, boy, we just FedEx right out of that unwanted experience, which is always felt where? In your body. Throw yourself up into your thinking head. Right there may act as a temporary Band-Aid, but right there is where simple pain is transformed into complex suffering. And so if we reverse that strategy, come back down, stay with the body, your body knows what to do with this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Hear, hear. Yes. Yes. Oh, thank you for breaking that down and describing it in your way. And I felt it and believe it. And yes, I'm with you in that. And I want to ask a little bit about your background. And I had this kind of ping as you were talking about, you've written so many descriptions for narcotics and you were the pain, however you describe that.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, like to zoom out and look at people on their path of this life human experience that you have, and kind of looking back through the years, what got you into the dental? Was it surgery?
Yeah,
And
no,
then
so great.
in a way, like you were really understanding pain at the time more than you were interacting with people that were feeling physical pain, of course, tied to mental, all of it. And then here you are now. So could you maybe in a
Sure.
nutshell describe a little bit of
Yeah.
that journey for you? And is it as interesting to you as it is to me of like, wow, is there something to this like relationship with pain that has really been such a larger story of your life and sharing that with the world?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So briefly, right? So yeah, I have a somewhat circuitous, I suppose, interesting background. I mean, my first course of study was classical music. I mean, I'm a concert level pianist. I wanted to be a concert artist. So that was a big part of my thing. Then I realized, well, that's not so easy. My whole family was in the medical world. So I said, oh, I can do this thing. So I ran off and got my doctorate. And all the while realizing, I really want to do this. I want to help people. But realizing that, yes, on one level, it was an authentic, very legitimate career for me. I learned a tremendous amount about service, a tremendous amount about the nature of pain, everything we were talking about here. But it was also there to support this other ongoing journey, which has been hardwired into my system from day one. Understanding the nature of mind, understanding the nature of reality from both the Eastern and Western perspective. And so I'm tremendously grateful for what I learned in the healing arts. I started, co-founded a charitable organization that is now one of the world's largest oral health care facilities around the world. So I'm still involved with that. And I've used a great deal of what I have learned, both interpersonally with my patients who come in with a heap of hurt sometimes. You learn a lot about pain. I bring that kind of more Western approach and then augment it with Eastern methods like I'm talking about here. And so I wouldn't talk to my patients, even though I was aware of these trainings, overtly in the capacity that I'm talking about here, but it informs the way I relate to my patients. And so part of my job when I'm at the side of someone who's in pain physically, yes, I'll do everything I'm trained professionally to do to negate that pain, but I will also allow them to bring playfully replacing medication with meditation, that you can actually replace some of these, the really shadow side of big pharma and all the really not so cool things about narcotics. It's amazing. I mean, Norman Cousins says this, the most effective pharmacy is the one between your ears. I mean, the capacity of the mind to deal with pain is extraordinary. I mean, just look at for a really powerful example, do a YouTube search for Thich Quan Duc, the Vietnamese monk who self-immolated in protest of religious persecution during the Vietnamese War. I mean, here's a guy sitting in complete meditative equipoise without flinching as his body is consumed in flames. Like, how can a human being do that? Well, one way they can do that is because fire can't burn space. And when a mind is that open, is that accommodating, who knows what was really going on in this amazing individual? But I would suspect something along the lines of these practices, where your mind is so big, your heart is so big, nothing can burn it. So, best I can do with a really big question.
Yeah, no. Tell me your whole life story and your purpose on this planet in like 2 minutes. Yeah. No, that was very neat to hear. And I'm admiring the piano as you talk. And humans are just awesome. And I think in the spiritual world, I've been there from time to time, like, I just want to get out of here. Humans suck. They're destroying the planet and all the things. It's like,
right.
Humans are amazing. And to hear just even your story there and just what you've been into and what you're doing in the world. And it just always gives me personally that little spark of like love and hope for humanity too, just to hear the inspiration.
Yeah. And also, if I could say something here,
Yeah.
I think it's important in this day and age to always remember, and I'm actually somewhat more and more clear and articulate about this sort of thing, is that if what we're doing with our psychospiritual paths and our meditations and our practices, if it's not of benefit to others and if it's not of benefit to the world today, it's irrelevant. It's basically a form of new age narcissism and spiritual bypassing. And so I've found myself joining East and West, heaven and earth. I'm kind of familiar and trained in both philosophy and the tantras and the meditative arts and Western science and medicine and the like. And so I think it's a capacity that we have as Westerners to bring the great gifts that the West has to offer in conjunction with the ancient wisdom of the East and apply it to a world that's on fire. And so to me, it's another reason why I wrote this book, because spirituality meditation can very easily slide into these bypass issues. And so I wanted to say, hey, wait a second. No, these practices have real street value, cash value applicability when you're in a heap of hurt. And so that's the other reason I was inspired to write it. It's like, this is a type of treatise tome that I think in this age of so much contention and duress, it might be of some benefit.
Oh, yes. A book of the times for sure. And it was needed. It's been a while since I've looked at all the meditation books in a bookstore, but my guess is that yours will stand out now as something that will be more of that, I don't want to say realistic view, but in a way it is, yeah, what is reality right now on planet Earth? It's on fire, So wow. I think this is a book of the times, and I read through it. I have so many books that I'm reading always, but it's one that I really appreciate, even the personal little anecdotes I saw and your living examples and all the quotes. Even just listening to you today, I'm sure the listeners can get you're a walking just resource of these amazing quotes and from all the different wise people that have walked on this planet. So the book is also that, just these little nuggets. Even just this morning, I was looking through, like, you had a Garth Brooks quote in there, which I grew up with Garth Brooks as a, definite fan, and just the standing outside the fire. I just think just lacing in things like that in this book, it is an enjoyable read. And then you're such a light being. And I know some of your other books and topics that you share on around death and pain. And I just think it's a refreshing take to meet someone like you who has, to me, you feel effervescent in a way, just light. You're here sharing the work and you're keeping it real and grounded, and an amazing delivery. And then to be able to talk about things like pain and suffering and death, which are a part of life. And I think sometimes, especially in our culture, they have such a negative connotation. People don't want to go there. So I really appreciate you doing this work, because again, I just think it's needed, especially now more than ever.
Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a delight to be able to share some of the stuff with others, because it's been so impactful for me. I mean, personally, the conviction, Rebecca, comes from experience, being in really, really difficult emotional states, experiencing some of the most painful physical things you can possibly experience, and having these practices come to my side and really help me. And again, I'm no different from anybody else. If they can help me, they can help anybody. So that was the inspiration. I was like, whoa, this stuff works. So that's why I got into it.
Oh, yeah. And the service that you mentioned. Just so important. So great. Well, shall we go through a short practice?
Yeah, let's do something. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this one's very brief, but it also has a lot of applicability, especially in this particular age. And it's what I refer to as a kind of anti-complaint meditation, which will tie in a couple of the kind of narrative themes we've been talking about today. And so the invitation is really as follows. The next time you feel the urge to complain, and like, how many times a day does that happen now, right? The next time you feel the urge to complain, maybe close your eyes, pause for a second, look within, and inquire briefly, what am I feeling right now that I just don't want to feel? And then stay with that. So right here, you're reversing your normal strategy. Something gets your goat. You're going to feel somewhat unwanted experience in your body, usually some kind of contraction. And the reactive habitual deal is to just express it with your complaint. But here you reverse that strategy. Stop, look within. So right there, you're observing it, you're being with it, you're inquiring, you're going through all three of these phases in rapid order. What am I feeling right now that I just don't want to feel? And then stay with it. And just like we talked about earlier, your body will know what to do with it. Where in the life contract does it say you're always supposed to feel good? Stay with it. You'll notice yourself opening to it. The contraction will release. And then if you still have to express yourself in a practical way, then you now do it in a responsive way. You become responsible instead of reactive. And then from that more spacious stance comes appropriate response to the world and to your own inner mindscape and landscape. So just that, you can open your eyes, just that, to me, hey, check it out. Practice it, do it. For me, this has become, it's like with any practice, right? You know this, Rebecca. You do it long enough, it starts to do you. So there has to be a little of investment to reverse a lifetime of habitual patterns, to always express our complaints. In fact, I think, again, it was Trungpa Rinpoche who famously, beautifully said, elegance is life lived without complaint. And so this simple practice allows you to take ownership, to be responsible to what you're feeling on the inside, and to take ownership of it, relate, here it is, relate to it instead of from it. Because relating from it is no relationship at all. That's just the usual reactive thing. So now you pause, look within, feel. And if you'll notice when you do it, it's so interesting. You'll notice this contraction thing happening. You notice you're not doing it when you start to run commentary. But wait a second, I really do have something to complain about. Cut it back into the body. But they really did wrong me. Cut it back to the body. And so everything we talked about, you'll notice in this little exercise, this tendency to contract, squirt out of your body into your head. Whoa, wait a second. No, label that. Your mindfulness comes in there. Back to the body. Wake down, back to the body. And then notice how the wisdom, the genius, the crucible of your body will purify that unwanted state if you just let it, right? So that alone, whoa, give it a try, and see how it works for you.
Yes, I was waiting for that. So it's like, then what does the body do with it? But it's like remembering there's still even a greater force there that is gonna chew it down, alchemize it, however you might describe.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah. So good. Good.
Cool.
Well, we'll officially wrap this up here. Thank you for that experience. And I was able to feel it right away. So I hope those of you listening, if you didn't sit and actually take that in, go back and do it when you can. And it's powerful and it's quick. When people tell me, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to, yes, you do. It's just a few minutes, right? Like it does not take long. So that was very, very nice and applicable.
Cool.
Okay, so the one question I must ask, which I do ask everyone, and the more I do these episodes, it's like, well, this is really the whole point of the whole talk today of modern mindfulness, or like, why is mindfulness important? But if you could say either like one word or kind of this one sentence thing, why is awareness, mindfulness, meditation, why is it important right now? Above all the other ways to describe it, is there a simple way to say, why is it important for us to have these practices in our modern times?
Yeah, good one. Well, I think it's because of the invitation that mindfulness allows to establish a new relationship to the contents of our minds and our hearts. That, again, somewhat I was talking about earlier, if we don't relate to our mind in this kind of meditative way, then we become prisoners of the contents of our own experience. We're then buffeted around by the contents of our mind because we're so close, we're so completely entangled and ensconced in the contents of our mind and experience that we just basically are living life on automatic pilot. So the meditative art, especially mindfulness, and I think it's also important to throw in, you probably know this, in both Sanskrit and Pali, the word for mind and heart are the same, chitta, which means heartfulness. So when you talk about mindfulness, you're talking about heartfulness. This is really important because, just like you said earlier, otherwise the meditative thing just becomes cerebral cognitive gymnastics. But it's just as much about the heart as it is the mind, because they're the same. And again, there's that other unification of mind and body, right? Where's your heart? It's in your body. So just to reinstate, the genius of mindfulness is the capacity to establish a new, more accommodating, spacious relationship to the contents of our experience, to allow ourselves to be human, to give ourselves permission to be human, and then to act from that more sane point of view.
Yes, like you brought the heart in there at the end. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, Andrew. Well, the book is out. You are here. I'll put all the links below in the notes, but are there certain
Cool.
places where people can either find you? Are there things you have coming up that you're offering? Where do you like to hang out virtually?
You're cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, my website, andrewholecek.com lists all the stuff that I do. And as you were talking about earlier, so gently, I teach a lot on lucid dreaming, dream yoga, death and dying, meditation. And lately, I'm doing a fair amount of teaching on non-duality, nature of mind type stuff. And so if you go to that site, that'll lead you to all my propaganda. And then also within that is an Edge of Mind podcast platform where I interview some really quite compelling people over the last number of years. And then lastly, I have a community we started some 5 years ago called Nightclub, which is a way to support the nocturnal meditation. So this is another whole track. I've written 3 books on these guys. Again, another way to expand our mindfulness to include even the nocturnal mind and the 5 types of meditation associated with sleeping and dreaming. And so, yeah, that's a decent way to get a hold of what I'm doing, and appreciate the opportunity for being able to share that. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Nightclub. That's so good. Yes. All right, everyone, Reverse Meditation. The book is out now. The link's below. I highly recommend it. Add it to your library. And Andrew, thanks again for being here and sharing all of your words and heart.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's a delight. Thanks for the great questions. Fun to spend time with you.
Yes, you're welcome. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.